Okay, hi everyone. I'm Gila Glassberg. I'm registered dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor. And tonight I have with me Rina Deutsch.
Hi,
And
everyone.
if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you live and what do you do?
Okay, so my name is Rina Deutsch. I live in Toronto, and what do I do? I do a lot of different things, thank God. I am a makeup artist. I do weddings and bar mitzvahs and events and that sort of thing. I'm also a Judaic studies teacher at the B'nai Kiva High School here, the girls' school, and I also just recently became a college teacher.
Wow.
So yeah, thank God. Like that's basically what I do: makeup and Jewish education.
Wow, that's a unique combination of things.
It is. And it's funny because I actually got into Jewish education through the makeup because I was doing I was doing makeup for somebody, and I am a very talkative person. So as I do people's makeup, very often we schmooze. And one of my favorite topics in the whole wide world is Torah and God and self-improvement and all those things that are connected to each other. And so this one particular client, I was talking to her a lot about these topics, and she looked at me, she's like, "Oh, I want you to go on a trip." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." Because I'm also a chronic people pleaser. So I was like, "Okay, no problem." And I went on her trip. It was the first time I was able to, thank God, be a city leader or community leader for the JWRP, now Momentum
Mhm.
Trips. And through that, I ended up getting into informal Jewish education, and I ended up working at NCSY for a few years. And then I ended up in the classroom. And so makeup carried me to where I am right now, which is very, very interesting.
That is really, really cool. Wow, that's like such a cool story. I guess you kind of like followed your passion.
Yeah, I followed my passion, and I've been trying also to like sort of read the signs and follow the path that I feel is being laid out in front of me.
Wow. Did you grow up religious?
I did, I grew up religious. I feel like I went through a few years where I was probably what you would call rebellious,
Hmm.
probably between like 13 and 15, on and off. But I did grow up in a religious home. I have a religious background, and thank God, it's working out.
You grew up in Toronto?
I did.
Wow, and you're still there.
Still here. Yeah, we're still kicking it.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I know a lot of us were rebellious teens, but we
Yeah,
put it behind us. We it made us stronger, stronger adults.
right. 100%. I think that everybody's got a different path, right? Everybody walks along a different path. For whatever reason, mine was what it was, but I don't look back on it with any regrets at this. Maybe a little embarrassment. I will definitely say a little bit of embarrassment, but not so much regret because thank God, really, I'm very good with where I am now. And I don't know if I would be where I am now if I hadn't followed the path that I did, right? So I can't look back on anything and regret it if it led me to where I am now. I could look back and be a little embarrassed, but regret is not something that I'm going to do for that.
We're all a little bit embarrassed of our teenage years, so that's okay.
Thank God, it's all good. It
Yeah,
should never be any worse.
yeah, yeah. So did you ever read the book The Four Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin?
I have not.
Okay, so she talks about like the different tendencies, and one of them is a rebel.
Mm-hmm.
And the rebel, like it's really only having to do with expectations, the whole book. Whatever, I'm going
Mm-hmm.
off on a tangent, but basically the rebel like has a hard time with internal expectations and external expectations. But she's
Mm-hmm.
like also saying like the pros and cons of being a rebel, because like the rebels are like the people that like uprooted things that shouldn't have been, or like went against the tides, and like produced like the best things in the world. So just
Wow. That is very
yeah.
interesting. It's funny. My mother always said to me, she's a phenomenal woman. My mother, I owe a lot to her, and she was a Baal Tshuva, and I think that she sort of felt like when she was raising me that she taught me too much to think for myself, and she said that she always felt like that made things more difficult for me. And I told her, now looking back as an adult, I'm like, no, thank you so much that you taught me to think for myself, because I don't mind, sometimes bucking the system when I think there's something that's a little questionable about it or whatever. And I've really worked and been able to find my own path, which I don't know if I would have done if I hadn't been given that no, think for yourself and you know, consider different options and chase down different ideas and see what you come up with. So maybe that tendency of being a rebel is sort of something that come by kind of naturally.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because like we were talking about before we started recording. So I do something called intuitive eating,
Mm-hmm.
and what I do with my clients is I try to get them to understand like the belief system that they've kind of like adopted by osmosis. Because if you live like in the world in 2020, it is what it is. Like most of the world is like stuck in diet culture. Like probably 90% of people are talking about like how fat they are, how uncomfortable they are with their body, whether they're thin or not. So it's like I asked them to think about like, when did that start for you, and like, has that been serving you? And obviously it hasn't been. Everybody will say it hasn't, but like it's interesting because a lot of times we just pick up like belief systems or ideas and we just believe them to be true, and like that is something that we believe is important in like the Jewish faith, because we want our kids to like pick up Judaism by osmosis. But we do also like value questioning and, you know, like thinking outside of the box, because otherwise you're just sort of like a robot.
100%. And we're coming up now on Pesach very shortly, and that's all about questions, right? It circles around the 4 questions, and I understand that they're questions that have prescribed answers, but I think that's actually one of the coolest things about Judaism, in my opinion, is that it's okay to have questions, because really we do have a lot of answers, if not all of them. I think we have all of them, but certainly you can say a lot. And with the concept of Shivim Panim LaTorah, that there are 70 faces to the Torah, there is a place that everyone can find themselves in. You can, you know, okay, so if this idea doesn't resonate with you, or this shita, this, you know, particular path, well, guess what? There are 69 others. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater just because this one particular one isn't really speaking to you. And I think that that's really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. And like I remember when I was in high school, I won't say where I went to high school, but I was very like uninspired, I'll say. And I remember having like this one teacher who like made like Jewish studies like so like exciting, and so like any question was welcome. And I was like, so that was like my first I think it was in 12th grade, that was like my first experience with like Judaism, being like allowed to ask, or like getting really curious, or like that being welcomed. And like, and then I went to Tomer Devorah for seminary, and like,
Oh, nice.
yeah, they also like totally welcomed that, and like I was able to like grow so much. And I kind of like miss it, because like as an adult I feel like we do like conform a lot, and that's really hard for like, I guess, out of the box thinkers.
Yeah, it can be, but I think that it's as an adult, it's like more difficult to carve your space out. But it can be done. It can. It is a little bit more. You're right. It is a little bit more difficult, but it can be done to a certain
Yeah.
extent.
Yeah. So, so something that like really stuck out to me was I heard your interview with Soul Sessions, right?
Yeah, with Karen. Yeah.
Yeah, with Karen, which was amazing. And I listened to a lot of different podcasts, and I actually met Karen at the Kavana conference, and she's like so sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like on my to-do list to subscribe to her podcast, but like I was so backlogged with the other podcasts that I was listening to. But then
Totally understand.
yeah, but then with Corona, like my to-do list of listening to things has, I guess that's one good thing. So I was looking for something else to listen to while I folded like, I don't know if you could say like a pile of laundry. It was more like a mountain of laundry. Um,
Yep.
yeah, and I heard your interview with Karen, and it was like the first half was like very like beautiful and nice and calm, and then I started to hear your story, and I'm gonna ask you to share it. But I just like I was so moved, because like I don't know if it's just me, but just as a community, I feel like it is very hard to be like vulnerable and open, and we're scared of judgment, and like when we're a little bit outside of the box, like it kind of like creates this like uncomfortable, I don't know, like this uncomfortable, like, I don't know, unknown territory that we are all sort of like questioning. And as I was saying before, I like started to blog for Project Proactive, and I talk about like feeling really anxious or feeling really depressed, or like different things have happened in my life. And like, I feel like that's a little bit out of the box for my community, but like, I also feel like it's really important for people to know like we're human. So
Sure.
yeah, I wanted you to know that. And if you could share with us like the story that you like about your husband, if you're comfortable.
Yeah, sure. And just to speak to the idea of it being out of the box, feelings of anxiety or depression or that sort of thing. I think it's a lot more in the box than we think, but I think it's so deep inside the box that that nobody lets it out. And I think if it was allowed to be outside the box, like more figuratively, like if it was allowed to be outside the box, it would really help our community in a big way. So I think being open and being vulnerable about these sorts of things in like a real way, right? You could still see that you're obviously like you're a successful and competent and functioning human being. It doesn't mean that you can't have feelings that sometimes are really challenging and difficult, but you see that you manage with them. And I think it's really important for people to see that so that we can destigmatize it and we can turn it into something that people can talk about so that they can learn to not just survive through their life, but they can find a way to thrive no matter what they're facing. I think that that's so good for you for doing that. Really, that's amazing. And Project Proactive is an incredible organization. I think they're great.
Amazing.
So our fun little story, about, I think we're coming up on 10 years ago, my husband woke up one morning and was feeling like numb and tingly from his waist down. You don't really know my husband, but I do. And he's like the kind of guy who's like, whatever, if you have something wrong, you walk it off, right? Or, you put duct tape on it and then you're fine. So for about a week and a half, he's walking around, he's feeling a little funny, but he didn't really want to do anything about it. Finally, I convinced him, like, maybe you should go to the doctor and get that checked out. He didn't actually have a family doctor because his had retired, and he's like, oh, I don't need a family doctor. So he went to a walk-in clinic and went to see the doctor there. And the doctor's like, oh, that's a little weird. Why don't we send you for an x-ray of your spine, your lower back? Maybe you slipped a disc or something. So he went and he did that. And nothing showed up on the x-ray. So the doctor said, okay, you know what, like, let's see, give it another few days. If it doesn't go away, I'll give you a referral to a neurologist. So it didn't go away. He gets the referral to the neurologist. And we went to see the neurologist after, like, wasn't really such a long time, because my husband's very persistent. He called the office, and he was like sweet talking the receptionist for such a long time. She put him on hold for a minute, and then she came back. She's like, actually, we just had an opening for next week. So yeah, that worked out really well for him. Anyways, so we went to see the neurologist, and he said, okay, I'd like to book an MRI for you just so we could rule out things like, transverse myelitis, this, that, and the other, and multiple sclerosis, and blah, 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 blah. And he listed like 10 different things. So of course, as the highly intelligent people that we are, the first thing that we did when we got home was we Googled every single thing that he said. And it was probably the most terrifying 3 hours of our lives, because some of them were like pretty benign, and then a lot of them were like really bad. And I would say that chances are at the top of certainly my husband's list of what the worst possible outcome could be was definitely MS, because it's chronic, and there's not so much you know about it. There's not so much you can do about it. And okay, fine. So we live in Canada. We have a socialized healthcare system, which, and on the one hand, is really, really wonderful, but wait times for certain things like MRIs can be very, very long. So we tried to book an appointment. This was in May, and they were saying, oh, well, we don't have anything until the end of August, maybe the beginning of September. And we were thinking like 3 months is just way too long to wait and figure out what's going on. So we booked an appointment for an MRI clinic in Buffalo, and drove there to get it done instead. Now, we went for the MRI, and probably about a week later, the neurologist office called us and said, we got your results. Can you make an appointment to come see the doctor? And my husband is not always known for his like patience when it comes to big things. So he's like, could you just tell me now over the phone? And she said, no, sir, I'm sorry. I'm really not allowed to do that. He said, well, what if I wanted to come and pick up the report so I could take it to my own doctor? She was like, well, yes, I guess you could do that. So he drove down to the office and he picked up the report, a copy of the report, and he read through it, and it said that the findings were consistent with multiple sclerosis. I was in makeup and aesthetic school at the time, and he called me up. I was doing my clinic hours, like in the student clinic there, and he's like, Rina, you gotta come out of school. Like, I need you now. Or actually, I think he called and left a message, but because I was in the clinic, like I didn't answer my phone, and he just showed up at the door and was knocking on the door, and everyone's like, your husband's here. I was like, oh, that's a little weird. So he came and he showed me the report, and he told me, and we were both like completely shaken. I think, I don't know if we were in denial or we were just trying to be very optimistic and hoping for the best. And this was definitely not the best. So we went for, I took the rest of the day off school, and we went for a drive, and we ended up in a little plaza in our neighborhood where there's like a bakery. We figured we'd stop and get something to eat. And we pull into the plaza, and who pulls up right next to us but his mother? Okay. And she was like, why aren't you at work? And why aren't you at school? So she knew something was up, and like, this was not something where we could just like, gloss it over or make something up. So my husband just sort of like handed her the report through the car window. And instead of flipping out the way we thought that she would, she was like, okay, you'll just call Daniel. And we're like, Daniel? So her first cousin, who we knew pretty well, Dr. Daniel Selchin, actually ran or still runs the MS clinic at St. Mike's Hospital, which is one of the biggest hospitals in Toronto. And they actually are sort of like a big MS center for research and treatment in Canada. And Avi's cousin just happened, to run the clinic there. So we gave him a call, and we were able to sort of expedite the entire process because, like I said, socialized healthcare, it could have been months till we would be able to get in to see a specialist. And thank God, because of the connections, we were able to get in and get to see a doctor. And it was a really weird sort of conversation or meeting with the doctor, where we go in and like, your sort of expectations are like, okay, fine, I'm going in now to see the specialist, the person who is, this is their specialty. And you sit down in front of the doctor, and you're like, okay, so what can you tell us? And he's like, well, I could tell you that you might have symptoms like this, and you might have symptoms like that, and you might have symptoms like this, and you also might have symptoms like that. And sometimes this treatment works for some people, and sometimes that treatment works for some people, and sometimes that treatment works for some people, but really we don't know anything about this, and have fun.
Wow.
So that was essentially how our first appointment went. He wasn't trying to be mean. He was really just trying to be very honest with us. And he was like one of those really old school doctors where bedside manner was perhaps not on the top of his list. And he said, like it's an autoimmune disorder. We don't really know so much about it. There are certain disease modifying drugs that are out there that can sort of help stave off symptoms. We can treat certain symptoms, but there's no cure. We don't know anything to do to reverse or to stop the process. And it was a lot to deal with. It was a lot to deal with. Now, on top of all of this, the week that we went to go get Avi's MRI in Buffalo, a week before, I had a miscarriage. And listen, when it rains, it pours, yeah. Right? So I had a miscarriage, and we were sort of like just in the throes of kind of dealing with that when we went for the MRI and we got all the results. And it was just like a very, very emotional and tumultuous time for us. As anybody who's ever been diagnosed with a chronic illness knows, there is a very deep sense of loss and grief that comes along with it. So the five stages of dealing with a loss, we definitely went through all of them, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I can't remember them in order right now because my brain is almost completely turned off at this stage in the game. But the funny thing is that it was very rare that we were in the same stage at the same time. Mm-hmm. So, while he was, let's say, depressed, So I'm bargaining. I'm like, well, I will find, I had a good friend who was a holistic nutritionist. I'm like, give me every single protocol you have. What should he be eating? What should he not be eating? Give me a Bach remedy. Give me a this, like, what do you need me to do? Are there chakras that we can align? Like, tell me anything, right? What if we see this doctor? Or what if we go to the that doctor? Or what if I say 7,000 Prakmat Tehillim a day? Like, how about, we'll figure it out, right? Like bargaining with God. Like, I will do anything that you want as long as you heal him. And he's, depressed. Then comes to a certain point where, I'm angry, right? Because, so this is fine. I'm angry and then also feeling a little guilty all at the same time, because like to a certain stage, to a certain extent, I'm like, well, but like I didn't really sign up for this. But hold on a second, like he's sick and it's not me, and right? There are like a lot of conflicting emotions going on so I'm angry and feeling a little guilty while he's decided, like, actually, maybe it's okay. Maybe we'll be able to deal with it, right? And we're going back and forth between the different 5 stages all at different times. And instead of communicating well, we were just sort of so caught up in our own thoughts and our own feelings that we sort of lost each other for a little while. I mean, not that we lost each other really, but we were still together, and we sort of thought that we were pretty good or okay, but we weren't really doing great. Now, in all of this, which maybe was crazy, but seemed to both of us right at the time, not immediately after, but a few months later, I did get pregnant again, Baruch Hashem, and that baby is now almost 9 years old, and she's quite wonderful and amazing. But I'm not sure that throwing like postpartum hormones into the mix was necessarily the world's best idea, although it was something that we had discussed, and certainly after the diagnosis, Avi was not up for anything like that for a while. And then one day he looked at me, he's like, you know what, I'm not going to let this get me down. If we were planning on having a 5th child, then let's do this, and like let's keep living our lives. But about a year after Eliana was born, I remember distinctly, we were getting ready for Shavuos, and I can't remember what exactly happened, but we got into this massive fight. And we're a normal couple. We've always like argued or bickered or whatever you want to call it, but we never like fought like we were like screaming at each other and like whatever. And we were standing in the kitchen and we were yelling at each other and this whole crazy thing. And finally he just got so fed up. He's like, I'm taking out the garbage. And he walked out the door and he slammed it behind him. And it was like awful. That Yantif was terrible. We literally sat in silence at the table. Like we didn't look at each other. We didn't talk to each other. It was so uncomfortable. And after Yantif, we kind of turned to each other. We're like, okay, something's got to give here. And we got a babysitter because we had five little kids at home at the time. And we went for a walk. And I think we walked for like 4.5 hours, like in circles around our neighborhood. And we just like let it all out. Every anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance, like every single feeling, every single thing that we had gone through, every thought that had run through our heads over the last, year and a half, finally came tumbling out. And we managed to open up to each other enough to be able to say, okay, listen, you're going to have your feelings about things, and I'm going to have my feelings about things. Like, something that makes perfectly good sense, but is not always easy to hear as a support person is, okay, like, I know you're trying to help and you're being really wonderful, but you don't understand, right? At the end of the day, thank God, I don't have MS, and I don't know what it is to either feel numb and tingly from the waist down, for 6 weeks on end, or, as he's had other issues, come up where he's not really sure 100% where his hand is. So like he can't get his food into his mouth properly. Like, I don't understand that. I can try to imagine it, and I can be very empathetic and be there for him in whatever way he wants, but he's right. Like, I don't understand that. And then, I would be upset. Well, you don't understand how hard I'm trying to be there for you. I don't, all these sorts of things. And there were all these things that just finally came bubbling to the top, and we were able to look at each other and be like, okay, it's all right for you to feel like I won't understand. You're right. And I feel bad that I won't, but by the same token, like I can only be there for you as much as I can be there for you and as much as you'll let me be there for you. Right. So, we were able to work past that. And then, my own feelings of insecurity of like, am I going to be a good enough wife? Am I going to be a good enough support? Am I like, can I handle this? Can I do this? All sorts of things. I was able to voice those things to him, which I kept to myself, right? I'm not going to turn to my husband, Nabakusuk, and be like, honey, I don't know if I can deal with this. Like, he doesn't need to deal with that. Mm-hmm. And yet we came to a place where we could deal with both of each other's difficult emotions. Nothing is not discussable. That's not a word. But nothing is off the table for discussion anymore. And I think that's helped us sort of come to a place where, we can really be open and honest and really now take care of each other back and forth in a way that's really helped us get through the last 10 years. Baruch Hashem, I think we're doing pretty okay.
Wow. Yeah, definitely. That's quite a story.
Yeah. Thank God.
Yeah, thank you for sharing it. Like, I don't know, it's just like so moving. I heard a lot of that story on the other podcast, but it's just like very powerful that like you're so open and that you're so like honest with like feeling guilty that it's hard for you. Like being honest about that, like it's so hard to be there for other people, but it's also hard for us. Like when other people are going through stuff, like it impacts us, it affects us. And I think that a lot of times when people are going through, like I know there are people who a mother gets sick or somebody in the family gets sick and they're very like hush hush about it, and no judgment at all, but I just feel like it's so burdensome and painful to not talk about it. But at the same time, like I actually have a friend who like a few months after her wedding, she was diagnosed with cancer. And and I remember when she told me, it was like a few months later, and she's like, it's so hard to tell people because when I tell them I have to be their therapist, like they're looking at me like, oh my God, what are you gonna do? Like,
and you're like, well,
right, and you're like, right, so it's okay. And she's like comforting them. So like I get like why it's so hard to like tell people, but like it's just like, I don't know, how do you have the strength to talk about it like so openly?
I don't know. It doesn't feel strong to me, to be honest. Like it just feels normal. I remember when we first found out, so we told our immediate family, and we told, like, we didn't just like, take an ad out in the newspaper, right? Mm-hmm. But we told people, we were open about it. We weren't hiding it. But there were certain people that we called earlier on. And I remember speaking to one person in particular, and she said to me, why are you telling people? I said, what do you mean? Why are we telling people? She's like, it's going to ruin your shidduchim for your children. And it's going to like, aren't you embarrassed? I was like, okay, hold up a second. It's not an STD. Like, right. He didn't do anything wrong. I'm not embarrassed that he has it. And I said to her, honestly, I'm like, I said, first off, there's no genetic link with MS anyways. And I said, but like, if there's somebody who doesn't want to marry one of my kids because they don't like the fact that their father is ill, like, or has a chronic illness, I'm not really sure I want my kid marrying that kid anyway. Like, it's not ruining.
So unimportant anyways.
Right? I'm like, I don't think that's ruining the shidduch thing for them. I think maybe it's weeding out the people that we don't want faster. Right? That's fine with me. But she, like, I was so taken aback by her response. Like it wasn't sympathetic, it wasn't empathetic, it wasn't kind or caring, or even like, oh, I'm really sorry, okay, but I gotta go. It was like, literally, why are you telling me? And I'm like, because I thought that you might be emotional support for me. Whoops, sorry.
Right. Totally. And I guess like we were talking about this before, but like on the one hand, it's like it is like even like on social media, it's like such a question now. Like we want to be like open and honest and vulnerable, but we don't like want to overshare.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like I remember when I posted something on WhatsApp. So I talk about like my disordered eating when I was a teenager, and like somebody wrote to me, she's like, I think you're being a little too open. And I was like, this is like my career, like my whole career like rides on like me going through this experience and like my clients relating to that. So like I don't think I'm being too open. And I do know that people are like nervous about it. That's why it's like so hard to be like, I don't know, maybe just for like creative people or like open people, it's hard to be like in a bubble of a community, because like I get the whole like social conformity and norms to a certain extent, but like on the other hand, like I'm sure sharing your story in a way is like very like liberating or like comforting, because like we said before, like it's helping so many people because you're being like vulnerable.
So I think that that's exactly the thing, is that, you know how like you're allowed to speak Lashon Hara if it's Lato Ellis, if there's a specific purpose and it's actually to help somebody, right? And not only, you don't even have to wait for somebody to come and ask you. You're allowed to proactively go and tell somebody something if you know it's like very, very important and will save them from any serious damage, physical, emotional, financial, right? So to me, that's the same thing. Like, I'm not running around telling my story for sensationalism. And I'm not telling it to say like, oh, look at us, we're so amazing. I don't think we are. I think we're pretty normal. But what I think is that, and I saw it happen, that because we were open about it, we were able to help other people. And over the past 10 years, we've had at least 3 or 4 people who have contacted us and said, I was just diagnosed with MS and I don't know you, but my friend heard about you guys and they said that I could come and talk to you. And we were like, of course you can. And we'll sit down with a couple. And, you know, when Avi was initially diagnosed, we didn't really know anybody who had MS. It wasn't something that we could sit and talk to anybody about. And even just like, it's not necessarily that we have any good advice of like, oh yes, you should try this medication or you should try that medication, but like you could talk to somebody who knows the position that you're in. So Avi can talk to the person who was diagnosed and I can talk to the spouse, right? We both understand what, you know, the people are going through and how complicated it is in so many different ways. We can give them our own anecdotal advice of like, okay, like we do not, obviously, we're not doctors. We don't even play doctors on TV. Like we don't give out medical advice, but Avi could say, well, okay, you know, I tried this medication. Like people will come and be like, so my doctor suggested that I try this. And he's like, oh, I did that. It was good. I didn't have a lot of side effects from it. I was on it for 7 years and everything was great. And then I had to change it. But if it'll work for you and you could be on it for 7 years, that's a great thing. You know, it's whatever. Or yeah, you know, if your doctor thinks that's good, that's fine. I had these, you know, these side effects, so just keep an eye open for them, but they're really manageable. It makes it sound so scary. It wasn't so bad. Like, you know what I'm saying? We can talk to them about that kind of stuff. And I can talk to the support person and be like, listen, it's hard and I feel you, but like we can be strong together and you can find a way through this and you can feel however you feel. You can be really, really freaked out right now and be like, I don't know if I can handle this. I don't know. Did I sign up for this? I'm not sure if I signed up for this. Right. And work through those emotions. I think that when I think more often than not, if we're allowed to feel certain things, right, we can actually most of the time deal with it. When we're trying to suppress it all the time because it's trying to fight to get out so hard, that's when you can't deal with it. And that's when we like kind of crack and lose it and can't manage things. But was it Mr. Rogers who had that saying, like anything that can be discussed, or was it Brene Brown? I can't remember, but something like anything that can be spoken about, right? Anything that can be discussed can be managed, right? And the things that we can't talk about, those are the things we can't manage.
Yeah, so I like do this with my clients a lot, like feel, deal, heal. So I've learned this from like a bunch of my mentors, like Rena Reiser, Parallel Abramowitz, but like Parallel, somebody who had mentored me in the past, she said like pain is sort of like a U. So like unless we reach the bottom, we can't really come to the top, and it's like just always stuck in my head, like things are really painful, like in life, like and our emotions are like really strong. Also a really good book I just read, The Highly Sensitive Person. So I identify with that book a lot, and whatever, you could look it up. And I wrote a blog post on a bunch of book recommendations, but yeah, just like especially like in really like traumatic situations, like our feelings are like so strong, like they're so powerful, and like they do feel like they're taking us over. And like I do think that I talk about this a lot also, but like, did you ever hear of Dr. Sarno?
Not sure if I have.
He wrote the book Healing Back Pain.
Okay.
Okay, so basically he says that basically like he was working in the field for many years, and he found that like traditionally treating back pain wasn't working, like the traditional methods of like shots and even surgery. And so he conducted this research, and he found that like a lot of times people who are experiencing back pain, it was because of emotional things that they were holding in their body that they hadn't processed. And the reason that this was able to like happen, your body's so amazing, is because there's like this blood vessel that runs through your back that when it constricts, it causes pain, but it doesn't cause permanent nerve damage. So that's like sort of like your body's like smoke alarm telling you like, do something, something's going on, something's not right, but it's not causing you permanent nerve damage because it's just to get you to like do something. And like he actually had like a lot of like rape victims that had never processed that pain. And it's like very powerful, like to like allow yourself to like be angry at God or like question him, like I don't know, just like especially right now with like Corona going on, like there's big problems and there's little problems, but really like everything is painful to whoever it is. And like we have to be able to like feel that pain and process that pain and talk about that pain and like validate that pain, because like feelings, they don't make really sense, but like emotions don't have to make sense. We just have to let them in.
100%. 100%. The things that we stuff down are ultimately, I think, the things that hold us down with them, right? They're like, you're not going to let me out, or I'm not going to let you out either. Right? You're going to be stuck in here with me if you won't let me out. Right. And I think that for whatever reason, we've sort of just decided as a society in general, right? We've put this, and it's really interesting, we've put this like massive value on the idea of being happy and everything being good and everything being wonderful. And I think to a greater or lesser extent, we're not even really sure what happiness is, because we're chasing down a lot of things that might feel good in the moment, but I'm not sure that they're really actually happiness, right? And then we're coming up short, but you don't want anybody to know that you're coming up short, right? So you have to look happy and everything's amazing, and you have to have a smile and everything's great, but kind of it's not. And then because we can't discuss it, we can't get past it, right? Or we can't figure out, well, what's the real problem? Where am I feeling the lacking, and how do I actually address it, instead of just putting something on top of it, like, whatever it is. Right. If it's material possessions, if it's a better job, if it's, like I'll solve all my problems by this external thing. Okay, well, actually, let's say. Or eating, whatever it is.
People think that if they lose weight, they'll be happy. So like that's what my culture has sold them.
Oh yes, 100%. When I lose 15 pounds, that is when I will deserve the love of my husband. Then I will deserve friends. Then when I look good, but at the end of the day, right, there are lots of very unhappy thin people, and there are lots of very happy not thin people, and all shades of in between, because it's got nothing to do with the outside. It has everything to do with the inside, right? And unfortunately, we think of happiness from being the outside in instead of the inside out, right? And that's just the wrong directionality.
Right. And it's actually interesting. You were saying like we have this high value on like positivity. And I remember for like a really long time thinking about this, because like I feel like maybe naturally like I'm a more negative person. Like I just feel like I get down easier. Maybe it has to do with like my highly sensitive person, or like I read the book Awareness by Miriam Adahan. I read like a lot of these like self-development books, and I don't know, it's like I've just been I was thinking like, I really wish I was more positive. I really wish I was more positive. Like the world is, I guess, obsessed with being positive. And I remember seeing, I don't know if you follow Rachel Tuckman, but she also, that's how I heard of the highly sensitive person. So I heard her talking about toxic positivity, and I was like, yes, that's what it is. Like, I'm very like authentic and like true. And like, obviously like you can't always control your emotions. Like you should try to control the behaviors that come from your emotions, but like, sometimes like really deep people, like they just have to like, it's okay to be like really sad, or it's okay that like things make you like question God, or make you question like why this is happening to me, instead of like we just have to have emunah. Like no, we're human. Like we have to, there's something to say about the struggle. Like there's something to say about Hashem doesn't like put us here to like torment us for no reason. Like
for sure not.
It's supposed to hurt.
Right. We even see that when Yaakov Avinu makes his way back into Eretz Yisrael after, you know, Rachel died, and he's all like, he's not all alone, but he, you know, he lost his favorite wife, and he comes in, and I think that he uses the word lagur sham, like to live there. And there's, I want to say it's a Rashi, but I didn't prepare it, but I'm pretty sure it's a Rashi that talks about the idea that Yaakov, the concept of lagur sham, is that he thought, he was like, okay, like all my troubles are behind me. I've had a really hard life, and now I'm coming and I'm settling down, and it's just, I'm done with the tsuris. And then what happens? So we have Yosef, and 22 years of like literal agmas nefesh, that he doesn't know if his son is alive or dead or whatever. And it's, and this Rashi comes to teach us the idea that like, you don't ever get to just be like, okay, I passed that, now it's like all coming up roses from here on out. Struggle and challenge is a part of life. And that's hard, but it's okay. I think we have really conditioned ourselves in this world in general to believe that easy is good and hard is bad. And therefore anything that you come up against that's hard, automatically your brain says, oh, this is bad. This is very, very bad. When and I'm not trying to say that, oh, if it's hard, no, it's great, it's good, it's amazing. But like, maybe it's not bad. Maybe it's just hard, and hard can be painful, but sometimes, like, you know, any mother who has ever, you know, given birth to a child, and it doesn't have to be that, like, epidural, not epidural, it doesn't make a difference if you got that epidural. Trust me, you felt something before you got it. Okay, we all know. We all know. All right, and it's one of the most painful experiences in life, but it is arguably also one of the best. Right? Very difficult, very hard, very painful. I'm not sure I would write it off as bad. And then there are certain things in this world that are so easy. They're so easy, but I don't know that they're good. Right? And that's one of the reasons that when we, on Rosh Hashanah, we wish people Hashana Tova Umetuka. Like, why can't we just wish good? Why can't we just wish sweet? Because there are certain things that are good, but they're not sweet. And there's certain things that are sweet, they're not good. Right? So we have to stop conflating the whole hard is bad and easy is good. Sometimes easy is very bad. Sometimes hard is very good. And sometimes there's like this huge gray space in between where hard sometimes is just hard. And like, we may never see the good in it. Right. And to be able to live in that space it takes a lot of work.
Yeah. Actually, I also talk about this a lot with my clients. Like, this is actually something I like talk about with my therapist a lot, is like understanding that like we don't just, some things we pick up by osmosis and some things we don't, right? So like human nature, the way that Hashem designed us is that like we will always take the path of least resistance. So like if you've been doing that for like 20 years and now you want to make a change because you found that it's not fulfilling, like the way that I try to teach my clients is like failure equals data. Like, because it's so depressing the other way, like depressing in a bad way. Yeah, like I wish I would have done like that hard thing for the last 20 years. Cause like, look how much better it could have been. Like that was for sure my self-talk before I did all this like inner work. And like, if you could understand that, like the media or like the people around you were saying, like, if you just worked really hard at work, like you would have a fulfilling life because you would be rich. And now 20 years later, you're like, oh my God, I just wasted 20 years because I don't feel happy. I try to tell people, this is more about like weight loss. Like I try to tell them, like, they're telling me like, wow, I've been on the diets for 20 years and now I hate myself. And now I feel like I'm even heavier. And now I feel like I can't even be in the room with food because I can't stop thinking about food. And like, what's wrong with me? Why did I not think to like try intuitive eating? And I'm like, why do you think? Because like the world is telling you that dieting would make you feel happy. Like sometimes like experience is the best learning tool, and like that's okay. Like even though it caused a lot of pain and even though it caused a lot of confusion and like it does cause like anguish to have like that regret, but like that, I always say this, like emotion is to get you into motion. Like how could you move now? Like don't get stuck in that like that yetzer hara of guilt, like guilt and shame. Like it's okay, we all make mistakes. Like that's part of being human.
Right. And I think that there's like a big difference of living for the moment and living in the moment. And I think that living in the moment is very, very important, because if we can focus on what do I have right now? What is this moment right now? So whatever I've been doing for the last 20 years, okay, it was 20 years ago. Right now, what am I doing? Right now, what am I? And okay, I might be making a decision right now to try to have a better future, but that future isn't here, right? So I can't be making decisions now that are in the future. I need to be making decisions now for now.
Right.
So if I can somehow or another, not again, so like when we live for the moment, then this moment is the only thing that matters. And therefore, like we can end up making a lot of really bad decisions because we're not thinking in any other direction. But if we can live in the moment where I accept the past, right? Like I get it, it happened, but now I'm at a point where I can pivot and I can change because I'm in this moment.
Right.
And now where I turn in this moment is going to help set the direction of what my future is going to look like. So trying to live in the moment, I think, is really important. And it's very hard for us. We're most people are either past or future oriented. Very few of us actually live in the moment. And I think like right now with Corona and everything, I think that that's part of, I know it's something that's causing a lot of people that I know anxiety. I'd be like, how much longer is this going to go? And oh my gosh, it was going to be until July. And oh my, I just heard that they said until this and that. And I'm like, okay, I hear that. And it is daunting. But what do you have in front of you right now? We have the next set of 24 hours. And the next set of 24 hours are going to need to have, a little bit of schooling and maybe an outing, like, to go outside in the backyard or to the park or whatever you're allowed to be, right? It's going to have breakfast and lunch and dinner and snacks. It's going to have, puzzles and games and movies and whatever. Okay, so deal with what you have in front of you right now. And that'll get you through to the next thing, right? Worrying about the next thing doesn't change the next thing. What you do here and now can possibly, right? And we only have control we only have control over what we have control over. And it's very hard to let go of. It's very, very hard to let go of. I think one of the reasons that I might be okay with the whole like loss of control is because I feel like I dealt with this and have been dealing with it for the last 10 years with my husband.
Right.
You wake up one morning and you're like, oh, look at that. Life is like never going to be the same.
Right.
And you learn to see that like certain things are in control and certain things are not. And we deal with what we can. And I have sort of taken on the mantra of I just do my best and I let God do the rest.
Right. Actually, I heard Chavi Garfinkel say that like when a Hebrew word means two different things, then they're connected. So I remember her saying like tsar and surah. So tsar is pain and surah is shape. And like the things that are painful for us are often the things that like shape our future or shape us as people. And actually, like a year and a half ago, I don't remember when it was, but Yemima Mizrahi came to speak here in Woodmere to people who had lost children. And I think it was bereaving mothers for bereaving mothers. And I actually went to this year because I had just lost my mother, but I didn't realize that it was for people who had lost children. But so it was like, it was at the Hava Farben's house. She would let me stay. Like she didn't say like I didn't realize. I felt a little stupid, but like I had really just lost my mother, and like it was so comforting to be with other people who were like mourning, and it was so powerful what she did. Like I'm gonna cry. She asked every woman to go around the room and say who they had lost. It was like literally the most like heart-wrenching thing to sit through. And I remember like some women like they couldn't get through it. And then I remember she turned the whole share around and she was saying like, I'm sure there are women here that have made like pivotal changes in their life due to their loss. And she went around the room again and she said, like, what have you changed in your life due to your loss? And it was seriously one of the most like moving experiences I had ever like experienced, because it was like these poor women, like they were broken really on so many levels, but they were also like so whole from like taking that experience and like elevating it. Like it's so hard, but like it really does, it changes you as a person.
100%. And I think that I think really in the beginning when you're dealing with any kind of loss, it's hard to process anything, and it's hard to try to deal with anything other than just those feelings in the beginning, and that's like super normal. And I think people have to allow themselves that space and that place to really just be sad and to really feel that loss. And then in a certain stage in the game, you're able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, so now what?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And when you come to that place of, okay, now what?
Right.
You can take the moment that you're in and say, what I'm going to choose to do now, how I'm going to choose to deal with this, the way I'm going to choose to carry myself, the way I'm going to choose to deal with life, the way I'm going to choose to deal with my kids, with my husband, with myself, with my whatever. Now that's going to shape the future, right? And I can bring things into that from, you know, like whether it's bringing, you know, honoring your mom or the child that you lost through, okay, I'm going to bring this forward into whatever it is. I had the opportunity in Israel when I went on that first trip. We went to visit one family fund who works with, you know, victims of terror and their families. And we had really, it was an unbelievable experience. They were in the middle of putting out a cookbook written with recipes of mothers who had lost children in terrorist attacks. And they put their child's favorite recipe in the book. And we had an opportunity to cook with these women. Wow. Okay, so they were just in the middle of publishing it. And we cooked with these women the favorite recipe of their child that they had lost. And listening to them talk, like they were talking about their child, right? And how much they love them and everything they did with all these different things. And then they were taking all of that and putting it forward into this book and putting it forward into this. Now you're going to remember my child because you're going to make whatever. I just remember making the kuba with one woman in particular. She was so cute. And I was like, now I'm going to remember you and I'm going to remember your son. Right. And she could have sat in her loss forever. And that would have actually been, I mean, totally understandable. Right. She could have sat in her loss forever and it would have been completely and totally understandable. And somehow or another, she found the strength inside herself to say, okay, I'm going to take my loss and I'm going to do something with it. And I don't know how she found the strength, but she did. And I think that everybody who is able to do that, anybody who's able to move on from a big loss, it's a Herculean effort, and I really wholeheartedly applaud it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I learned so much, and I'm so inspired. And like, I feel like I'm gonna cry. But
thank you so much. I have so many great book recommendations now. I wrote down everything that you said.
Well, you could see it on my blog if you want. I wrote a blog post about this.
Okay. Excellent. I'm definitely going to check it out.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
It was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure.